Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome for our first ever bowling broadcast here, courtesy of the Fort Lee Athletics Department here at Boulder City in Hackensack, New Jersey. Dan Long, Dimitri Nanis, and joined by a couple of VIPs in the house here, two legendary coaches in their own right, and Patrick Dunn of Holy Angels and Neil Grant of Fort Lee. And coaches, this is a matchup of two of the undefeated teams left here in Bergen County girls bowling. And what is this excitement like for you guys to see a great season now, getting a chance now to test your wits against teams that aren't in your normal league in the Big North? Coach Grant?
Well, first of all, just being undefeated at this point of the year for Fort Lee girls is a new experience for them. We've really enjoyed the season. We've met some of our goals. There's a few more to go. But regardless of what happens in this match or any other matches, it's been a great season. I try to tell the girls one ball, one frame, one game at a time. And standing next to Coach Dunn, who's been doing this for 25 years and is well respected throughout the county by all his peers. It's just a pleasure to be matched up in this situation. I know his kids pretty well, so I'm just looking forward to the matchup and having a great day out here.
And Coach Dunn, you've led a program here that for years has been synonymous with some of the best programs in Bergen County bowling. For you, how does this matchup feel for your team coming into it, knowing that you just were playing alongside Fort Lee when Fort Lee took home the county championship over the weekend?
Well, first of all, I want to congratulate Coach Grant and his squad. They bowled amazingly well on Saturday and earned every accolade they could possibly get. As far as bowling them this year as an undefeated team, I feel as we head into the state sectionals that competition is really what makes you better. And this is an opportunity to bowl a really good team, and win or lose, I think we will benefit from the experience.
And for both of you guys, you have two of the best bowlers in the county this year. Talk a bit about, for each of your teams, what those bowlers bring as leaders to your side and how they've been so talented and so good this season. First for you, Coach Dunn and Holy Angels.
Well, as far as Brianna Hetza, she has been really a leader in the program, really since she's been a freshman. Last year as a junior, she was one of our captains, and it's not just her bowling ability, which is fantastic, but also her wit. She's always got a smile on her face. Even when she's struggling on the lanes, she doesn't let it affect her as far as the team goes. She realizes that this is about team, not individual, and she has been a tremendous leader for us, and she will be greatly missed next year, not just for her ability on the lanes, but off as well.
And Coach Grant, for you, talking about Michelle Kim and what she's done here for Bridgman Bowling.
Yes, Michelle's been with us now for 4 years, and she's just an unbelievable person. She also plays softball and in the band, so she's busy all year. Her parents are great. They're here at almost all the matches, and she leads by example. She's the hardest worker on the team. That's nothing against the other girls, but she works, constantly working. But the most important thing, Michelle, is she is very likable by everyone. Other teams like her, our players adore her. If a girl's having a bad day, she will grab them, talk to them, and even after a bad game, she's always smiling. I mean, we are laughing in matches a lot of times when sometimes coach would say, well, you missed an easy spare, but she's laughing it off, and it makes it so much easier to coach because she's just a great kid and a great student, and she will be sorely missed as well. And as far as Brianna, she's a lovely young lady. Her father's here almost all the matches, and he's a gentleman, and we get a chance to talk to them a little bit, so there's nothing but good things to say about her and the rest of the Holy Angel girls.
Well, I just want to thank you both for allowing us to be here to cover this matchup of two of the best teams in Bergen County. We wish you all the best here today and then going forward in your respective sectional playoff rounds as well. So thank you guys, and you're a part of history here today, and hopefully this helps to grow the sport as well.
Thanks, Dan, so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. And fans, we're just getting ready, moments away from the start of today's match. Holy Angels 11-0 on the season. Fort Lee 12-0. Fort Lee coming off their first county championship in girls bowling history over the weekend. Defeated Bergen Tech 2-0 in the semifinals, and then Indian Hills 3-0 in the championship round. Fort Lee earned the number 4 seed in the tournament after bowling a 3-game total of 2,396 pins. Bergen Tech was the number 1 seed, Indian Hills was the 2, and Holy Angels the 3. Holy Angels claimed 3rd place overall in the tournament after losing to Indian Hills 2-1 in the semis, but bounced back to defeat Bergen Tech, the reigning county champs, 3-2 in the 3rd place match. Holy Angels will be in their blue, while Fort Lee bowling in their black polos. We'll see for Holy Angels. Bowling first will be Rachel Stanbury, then Katie McLaughlin, number 2, Kira Sullivan, number 3, Brianna Hetzer, the star bowler, the anchor at number 4. For Fort Lee, Caitlin Lee will bowl first, Sujin Kim will bowl second, Jenna Yang will bowl third, and Michelle Kim, the anchor for Fort Lee, will bowl fourth. So it's going to be fun to see here. It's going to be lanes number 49 and 50 here at Boulder City as we are in downtown Hackensack, New Jersey, taking this broadcast on the road here today. It's going to be a fun one here today as, again, this is history in the making as we have never been able to broadcast bowling action here on our Fort Lee airwaves. A matchup of 2 of the powerhouse programs as they're just getting their warm-up tosses in before we get underway this afternoon. Again, this is the first meeting between these two sides since last December 9th, 2021. Holy Angels won 7-0 that day. Each team, whenever you win a game, as we talk about the team point totals, you win 2 points with that game, and then you get an additional point for total pins overall in the day as well. So that time, with last year's matchup in December, Holy Angels won all 3 games, swept the set, and had the total pin margin as they won by a 7-0 margin. We again thank the coaches for both sides. For joining us pregame here, talking things over with Pat Dunn and Neil Grant. And then, again, this for me is a special moment, getting a chance to cover bowling for the first time as a broadcaster and getting to see these 2 elite teams on full display here. Holy Angels on track to win another league championship in the Big North United Division that has them alongside Paramus Catholic and IHA. And Fort Lee already has clinched their league championship in the Big North American as they went 6-0 in league play on their way to a undefeated run through league competition. So again, we're just moments away from getting started here. Just about 2.5 minutes left to go of practice time before we officially get things underway with this competition today between Holy Angels and Fort Lee. As you're watching all the action here, courtesy of the Fort Lee Athletic Department here on the Fort Lee Athletics YouTube channel. So again, you're joining us to watch little high school bowling here as Fort Lee about to take on Holy Angels here from Boulder City in Hackensack, New Jersey. Dan Long, Dimitri Nanis taking the show on the road here today. First ever edition, and what a matchup worthy of this showdown. Again, for maybe the bragging rights and supremacy in the county. Fort Lee just newly minted county champs for the first time in program history. They defeated the likes of a field that included Bergen Tech, Holy Angels, and Indian Hills. They defeated Indian Hills in the final, 3-0 in a best of 5. Holy Angels finished as third place. Both teams have yet to lose a dual match so far this year. Holy Angels a perfect 11-0 under Coach Bat Dunn, while Fort Lee is 12-0 under head coach Neil Grant. Practice rounds are complete for both sides, and we're about to get to bowling here today. Again, the lineups for both sides. Rachel Stanbury, the sophomore, will lead things off for Holy Angels. Katie McLaughlin, the sophomore, will bowl second. Kira Sullivan, the senior, will bowl third. And Brianna Hetzer, third in the county in bowling average, averaging just around 187.8 pins per game. She will be the anchor and the senior going fourth. Fort Lee is going to have Caitlin Lee, the senior, leading off. Soo-Jin Kim, the senior, bowling second. Jenna Yang, the freshman, bowling third. And then the anchor for Fort Lee is the fourth bowler, Michelle Kim. She is second in the county with a bowling average of 190.9 pins per contest. So this will be a good one here today, and we're getting ready for all the action on lanes 49 and 50, the far right corner of Boulder City here today. Fort Lee will start things off on lane number 49. And the first ball is going to be struck by Caitlin Lee, the senior, as Lee will knock down 9 on her first ball. Lee averages 137.8 pins per contest. And on lane number 50, we'll see Holy Angels being led off by Rachel Stanbury, who averages 165.5 per game. Not only a matchup of two of the top teams, but also two of the top bowlers that we'll see on display, both anchors for their teams, as that time missing on the spare attempt was Caitlin Lee. She puts up 9 in the first set, in the first frame here. As Rachel Stanbury will have her opportunity after putting up 7. On her second ball, she'll get the spare. Good start there for Holy Angels. As Rachel Stanbury, the sophomore, knocks it down, gets the spare, and now it's going to be the second bowlers for both respective sides. And knocking down 9 there on her first offering, Soo-Jin Kim, the senior, who averages 147.1 per game. On the other side, Holy Angels gets their first strike of the afternoon, courtesy of Katie McLaughlin, the sophomore. Averages 141.5 a game. So a spare and strike, and a great start to this one for Holy Angels. Fort Lee looking to capture a spare here on the second ball from Soo-Jin Kim. Kim, beautiful placement, knocking that one down on the far side, and she manages to convert on the spare herself. That'll bring us now to the third bowlers for both sides. Holy Angels on top right now by a margin of 27 to 19. And Fort Lee will get their first strike of the afternoon. Jenna Yang, the freshman, knocking them all down. After on the other lane, Kira Sullivan managed to produce 7 pins on her first toss. So each team now with 1 spare and 1 strike. Sullivan looking for another spare for Holy Angels. She manages to knock down 1, and she'll have 8 in the frame. That'll bring us to now the 2 anchors and 2 of the best bowlers in the county. Here's Michelle Kim for Fort Lee, as Kim will manage to have 8 on her first shot attempt. Kim averages 190.9 per game this season, second best in the county behind Mackenzie Flynn of Bergen Tech, who averages 198 a game. Here's Brianna Hetzer. Hetzer with an approach as well, and almost mirror images of one another as Hetzer rolls an 8 there and leaves 2 up. Hetzer averages 187.8 a game. So the drama continues. Here's Kim trying to complete a difficult spare and just managed to miss that 10-pin as she was trying to knock it in off the other deflection. She will have the 9 after having that split. Now Hetzer trying to complete a spare of her own, and she does. So 2 spares, 1 strike for Holy Angels in the first frame. 2 spares, 1 strike for Fort Lee in frame number 1. As now we get to frame number 2, and a great start here for Holy Angels, as that's going to be a strike thrown. As Stanbury now builds off her spare in frame number 1 with a strike, and Fort Lee is now moved over to lane number 50 as well. As Holy Angels getting back-to-back strikes to start off this match by Katie McLaughlin, the sophomore. So Holy Angels with their first 2 bowlers bowling strikes here in frame number 2 of our first game of this afternoon. Again, we'll bowl 3 games each, and someone will remain undefeated in dual action so far this season. And Lee missing on the outside. She'll have to settle for 8. She's got 17 through the first 2 frames. As Kira Sullivan knocked down 7 on her first ball of the second frame. Those strikes looming rather large right now, and there's a strike for Fort Lee. As Soon-Jin Kim, the senior, knocking them down. A strike after producing a spare back in the first frame. 85-66, the lead right now here for Holy Angels. As Sullivan will manage to put up an 8 here in the second frame as well after putting up 8 in their first frame. Fort Lee trying to garner some big-time points here, as that time it was Jenna Yang trying to build off her strike in the first frame. Now putting up a 9 spot here in the second with a chance to convert a spare. Hetzer, the star for Holy Angels, knocks down the strike. Building off her spare in the first frame. She's got 20 pins through the first 2. Here's the spare attempt for Fort Lee, and they convert. So Jenna Yang converts on the spare. She's got 20 pins. Well, now Fort Lee trying to put themselves in a position here, chasing a little bit. As it's Michelle Kim. Kim producing. That time, once again, like she did in the first frame, 8. As Fort Lee will also have Caitlin Lee going with a rotation in the 49th lane. Kim looking to produce here again with 2 pins left. Can she get enough of that? And she can't get it to get the spare, and she'll settle for another 9 spot put on the board. Bowling that time was Soon-Jin Kim. As again, both teams just operating on these last 2 lanes of the day. Here at 49 and 50 in the far right side of Boulder City. Great environment here as you just see everyone representing their respective schools in their bowling shirts and polos. This a big matchup here in girls bowling. Fort Lee looking for another spare, but they'll leave 2 on the board there for Kim. Kim has 46 pins through the first 3 frames. Looks like right now it's a bit of a stall on lane number 50 as a couple pins have not reset. So this is allowing Fort Lee just the throw right now as Holy Angels is just standing and watching. As Jenna Yang knocks down 8 in her first attempt here of the third frame. Four strikes already for Holy Angels as they are in the beginning of their third frame as a team. Fort Lee has only produced 2 strikes so far here in the first frame. This could be a big opportunity to pick up a spare. Yang, though, will have to settle for 1. She'll have 9 pins there and 47 so far through her first 3 frames. She's the leading scorer for Fort Lee so far here this afternoon in this, our first game of the day. And again, thank you for a little history, joining us for a little history here, broadcast history of first streaming bowling match. And Michelle Kim, she's not able to get the strike just yet. Her first 2 frames, she got 8 each time and then had to settle for just a pair of 9s. Now she has a chance here with 1 pin remaining. They have the opportunity here at a spare. Kim had a high game of 244 pins earlier this year in a win against Wayne Valley. Standout also as a softball pitcher. Will get the spare and get her first spare of the afternoon. So Fort Lee has bowled through 3 frames, and now they're just going to wait for Holy Angels to catch up. Again, that they had to reset the pins on the lane number 50 because there was a malfunction and it didn't reset completely. As Rachel Stanbury was the one who was up. The leadoff bowler had knocked down 8s and had 2 remaining. And the 6 and 10 pins waiting in the back right corner. 147 pins so far through the first 3 frames for Fort Lee. Temporarily they lead, but still Holy Angels has their bowling lineup to go, and that's a big spare converted there by Rachel Stanbury. Who had a high game of 223 earlier this season and a win against Fairlawn. Had a 542 set last time that they bowled against Ridgefield Park back on January 19. Here's Katie McLaughlin. Looking to go for the turkey. And she'll fall just 1 pin shy. She opened up this match with back-to-back strikes in the first and second frames and now just left that 10 pin up, but has a chance at another good number here with a spare potentially. McLaughlin, the sophomore, had a high game of 180 on the season. She's off to a rip-roaring start here for Holy Angels. Trying to aim for that 10 pin, and she clips it. Knocks it down, so she opens up with a pair of strikes and a spare. There's the approach this time on lane number 49 by Kira Sullivan, the senior. Sullivan knocking down 9 and has a chance here. As that's clipped in. Right now, Holy Angels on top. Listed at 180 to 147 right now. And finishing up with the 8 there was Kira Sullivan. So Holy Angels having the early advantage right now against Fort Lee, leading here in game number 1. 198 to 147. as we're heading to the fourth frame for both teams. Hetzer was working off of a strike in the previous frame. In frame number 2, got a 9 her first time up. As right now, again, they're just trying to catch up to where everything is. I think with one lane just kind of being used right now as a practice lane. Here's Hetzer looking for the spare. She'll get it dead on and have a spare off of her last strike. Hetzer up to 40 after 3 frames as we head to the start of the fourth frame. 218-147 the lead right now for Holy Angels here in game number 1. Both these teams undefeated. 2 of the last 4 undefeated teams in the county. And a good start there to the fourth frame for Fort Lee as Caitlin Lee garners the strike. Lee's first strike of the afternoon. Holy Angels has had the strike advantage so far here this afternoon against the Bridgmen. And there's a spare for Kira Sullivan. As Holy Angels converting there in that opportunity. Now Fort Lee, they got a strike to start off this frame. Getting 7 pins knocked down by Soo-Jean Kim. Kim, who had a season high 214 against Paramus Catholic on January 19th. Here's Hetzer. Hetzer showing why she's the anchor. Knocks them all down with a strike here in the fourth frame. Trying to keep that pressure on. After 4, it's now 248 total pins for Holy Angels. Fort Lee looking for the spare. They'll leave 1 on, so they'll have to settle for the 9 pins there. Soo-Jean Kim up to 56 through 4 frames. So Jenna Yang and Michelle Kim still to bowl here to finish off the fourth frame for both teams. And a slow roll there leaves only 2, so a roll of 8 there for Jenna. Jenna Yang had a season-high 196 game against Cliffside Park on January 23rd. That was also part of a season-best set of 523. Fort Lee's got to be trying to pick up these spares if they can't get the strikes. And leaving too many pins so far to Coach Grant's liking, most likely. And as I say that, they leave 1 there. So they'll settle for 9 pins as well again. As now Jenna Yang with 56. She right now is the leader on her team in this first game. She's got 56. Soo-Jean Kim with 55. Caitlin Lee working on a strike as well. Here's Michelle Kim. And Kim just has not been able to find that consistent roll just yet. She gets an 8 as she's working on a spare. Up to 36 so far in this opening matchup. 248-191 right now, the team score and the team lead in this game number 1 for Holy Angels. Again, they won last December when these two sides met, December 9th. They won 7-0. They won all 3 games and had the total pin number to give them the 7th point. As Kim, good accuracy there, knocking down the corner. And she'll build off her spare in the 3rd frame with a spare here in the 4th frame. (248-211). Holy Angels on top as we get things started now for the 5th frame between both teams. Caitlin Lee and missing on a spare opportunity. Holy Angels converts, though, to get things going with another strike from Rachel Stanbury. Stanbury with her second strike of the afternoon. Soo-Jean Kim. As Fort Lee is now on lane number 49. She gets it going with a strike of her own. Holy Angels with a left-hand bowling. Exploits there of Katie McLaughlin. McLaughlin has been solid so far, up to 75 in this opening game. Fort Lee trying to get their act going here. That time only getting 6 down was Jenna Yang. Freshman who averages just under 146 pins per contest. Holy Angels looking for the spare, and they just miss it that time. McLaughlin upset that she just missed on that one. She's been bowling a great opening game. McLaughlin up to 84 through 5 frames, halfway home. And Fort Lee, just an opportunity there as they leave 3. Jenna Yang now up to 63 pins in the contest in this opening game. Holy Angels starting to increase their lead a bit here. And still Michelle Kim upset, has yet to produce that opening strike of this first game. Kim is going to try to make her 3rd consecutive spare as she's about to roll the last bowl of the 5th frame. Kira Sullivan is operating for Holy Angels on lane number 50. As she knocks in a big spare there and gets congratulated by her teammates. And that brings up Brianna Hetzer after Michelle Kim does the damage there on the 7 pin in the upper left-hand corner to produce her 3rd consecutive spare. 295, 247 right now, the lead for Holy Angels, but they can distance themselves a little bit more here with Hetzer trying to finish off the 5th frame. Working on a strike. Hetzer will bowl another consecutive strike. And it'll be a 315 to 247 lead heading into the 6th frame for both teams. And now another strike rolled by Holy Angels on lane number 49 by the leadoff one, Rachel Stanbury. Fort Lee is going to be trying to keep things a little close here, but that first ball by Caitlin Lee is going to lead to a split. 3 pins left, but Holy Angels has taken advantage, throwing more strikes so far here in the opening game. Almost made it 3 consecutive strikes for the Angels. 1 pin, the 10 pin left up in the back right corner by Katie McLaughlin. Again, you're watching coverage of this showdown of 2 undefeated bowling teams in girls bowling action here in Bergen County. Fort Lee and Holy Angels, 2 of the last 4 teams left undefeated this season. Northern Highlands and Demorest are the other 2 teams that have yet to lose in a dual match. Holy Angels looking for the spare. They'll pick it up. Knocking down the 10 is Katie McLaughlin. Had a high set of 494 this year against another big North American Division team in Dumont. As Fort Lee missing there in that first offering by Soo-Jean Kim. Kim rolling a 3 on that line. Holy Angels leading here as we are currently in the 6th frame at Boulder City in downtown Hackensack, New Jersey. Thank you for being a part of history and supporting these student athletes from both fine institutions. Fort Lee Bowling just newly minted as the first ever county champions in their girls bowling history. defeated Indian Hills, also knocked off defending county champs Bergen Tech in the process, and being crowned the champions of Bergen County. This is near the end of the regular season for both teams, before they will then venture into their respective sectional tournaments. And there's a strike for Fort Lee, rolled by Jenna Yang. And that'll bring up the anchor, Michelle Kim. As the two anchors going toe-to-toe with one another. Right now, Brianna Hetzer has had more pins so far here in this first game. Hetzer working on back-to-back strikes. Missed that time. She'll leave 5 on the board and have a cheeky smile. Here's Michelle Kim looking for her first strike. And she just left that 10 pin up in the top right corner. Hetzer trying to find a way to get the spare here. This might be a little difficult, though, for her. But when you're the number 3 ranked bowler by average in the county, things that are difficult to most seem ordinary, though, to you. Hetzer looking for that top pin, try to clank it in, but just good effort there. Left that 1 pin afterwards, as now Hetzer up to 113. She's the leading bowler right now for Holy Angels through 6. Kim looking for another spare. Looking and hanging on that corner, and she knocks in the spare herself. She's up to 74. So after 6 frames, Holy Angels on top, 380 to 303 right now here. Holy Angels trying to take control of game number 1 against Fort Lee. Fort Lee has only given up 3 total points in matches this season. Those were the 3 their last time out against Bergen Tech when they won 4-3. Good start to the frame here for the Bridgemen as Caitlin Lee, the senior, strikes here on the opening ball of the 7th frame. As Fort Lee's going to be trying to mount a comeback here late in game number 1. And there's a missed opportunity for Holy Angels as they'll settle for the 8 pins there. 133 so far here in this first game for Rachel Stanbury. As Sujin Kim rolling that one. Stanbury averages a 165.5 per game. And there's a strike for Katie McLaughlin. McLaughlin, 104 so far through 7. And she's going to be building on a strike in her next frame as well. She has really stepped it up as the number 2 bowler in this lineup here today. That time it was the 3rd bowler, Kira Sullivan. Kim trying to get the spare here for Fort Lee, and she will. Perfect location there, building off of the ball that she rolled first to get the 7 pins knocked down. That's a big spare for Fort Lee as they, again, try to mount the comeback. Now looking for the spare and trying to knock down the 10 pin is going to be Kira Sullivan. Sullivan has it all dialed up and knocks it down. And she gets the spare for Holy Angels. Trying to build off a strike in her last frame. Here's Jenna Yang, the freshman. Yang with the spin. Knocks down another strike. Back-to-back strikes now for Jenna Yang and Fort Lee. As Bridgman trying to, again, find that consistency. Here's Hetzer. Hetzer, such a strong bowler. Another strike produced by the senior. Now Michelle Kim Love to get her strike game going here. And Kim finally gets what's been eluding her here in the opening game. She produces the strike. That was a big frame for Fort Lee. 3 strikes and 1 spare. As we now head to the 8th frame, it's a 444 to 379 advantage right now for Holy Angels. In control right now, as Fort Lee has not had the same amount of strikes and spares as Holy Angels have enjoyed in the early goings. Again, in frame number 8, Holy Angels so close to another strike, but the 7-pin was stubborn and would not fall. Spare attempt here for Fort Lee, and they get it with Caitlin Lee. Starting to heat up here. Lee working on a spare. Soo-Jin Kim will come up next, and she's been working on a spare in the last frame for Fort Lee. And Holy Angels misses on that spare opportunity by Stanbury. Leaves the door open a little bit here for the Bridgeman. 453, 383, the lead right now for Holy Angels. Again, you always have to factor in total pins as well. Just missed opportunity off of that first ball, just rolling a 1 was Kim, and that one hurts. Seeing that it was based off a spare in her last frame. Left-hander Katie McLaughlin lines him up and knocks 9 down. Kim trying to rebound after rolling that 1. Gets it curled down, and she'll settle for the 7. Up to 101 here in this first game through 8 frames. And immediately walking away was Katie McLaughlin. The sophomore knew that that shot opportunity was off, and she'll settle for the 9 pins. She's up to 132, and now a strike rolled for the hottest bowler so far here for Fort Lee in this opening game. That's Jenna Yang. And Yang has the turkey. 3 consecutive strikes in this contest. She's doing everything possible to try to keep this one closer. 485 to 421 right now, the Holy Angels lead. Here's Michelle Kim starting to feel it, get into her groove. That's back-to-back strikes for the senior star for Fort Lee. So the 2 final bowlers for Fort Lee starting to come alive. They have 5 strikes in their last 6 balls. Fort Lee is through 8. Now just waiting for Holy Angels to catch up. And that's a big spare picked up by Kira Sullivan. As Fort Lee's trying to put the pressure on here late in the opening game. Here comes Brianna Hetzer. Working on a strike from her last frame in the 7th. Hetzer again. She's got the double here, heading into the 9th. Through 8, 518 to 441 lead for Holy Angels. Fort Lee gets it going with a strike thrown by Caitlin Lee. 9th frame, it started with a strike thrown by Rachel Stanbury for Holy Angels. So Fort Lee, again, they may not be able to capture this opening game. When factoring total pins, want to finish strong here. Good connection and the finish on a spare by Katie McLaughlin. So strike spare is how Holy Angels begins here in the 9th frame. Soo-Jin Kim rolls the 9 and will have a chance And she can knock down the 10-pin to get a spare. Over 100 so far here in this opening game. Strength of Coach Neil Grant's lineup has been his third and fourth bowlers. 5 consecutive strikes between those two. Looking for the spare. Lined up, but just missed. As that went right down the middle. Just couldn't get a little bit of the clip of that 10-pin in the far right side. Soo-Jin Kim is now up to 110 here through 9. Here McLaughlin looking for the spare. She'll get it. Back-to-back spares now for the third place bowler. Working on the turkey here. Make it 4 strikes in a row for Jenna Yang. Yang is on fire right now. So Jenna Yang has erupted with 4 consecutive strikes. Now here's the star, Hetzer. Hetzer knocks down another strike. She's got a turkey herself. Strikes in the 7th, 8th, and 9th frames. Here's Michelle Kim looking for a turkey of her own. And she gets it. She has settled down nicely here as we go to the 10th frame here in game number 1. A 577 to 530 lead for Holy Angels as we head to the 10th frame. And a reminder to fans that in the 10th frame, you get a spare or a strike, you will be awarded a third ball. So this is where it is so important to bowl your best here in the 10th frame. As Holy Angels will be underway. And they'll start off strong with a Stanberry strike. Lee will roll a 7 on lane 50 for Fort Lee. So Stanberry will have an opportunity, 2 more balls here while finishing off her opening game of this matchup of the 2 unbeatens in girls bowling. Rachel Stanberry had a high game of 223 earlier this season. Back-to-back strikes for her dating back to the 9th frame as well. Now rolls there a 6. Has a chance for a spare to finish this up. And there is a spare for Fort Lee. As Caitlin Lee will get an extra ball herself. Lee up to 123 this afternoon in game number 1 for Fort Lee. Back onto lane number 49. Here's Stanberry's third and final ball. And just short of that spare. So Stanberry will finish things off with a 187. Great start for Stanberry in game number 1. On the extra ball for Fort Lee, Caitlin Lee will roll a 9 there. And there's a strike for Katie McLaughlin on 49 as she will get things going right off the spare. So Caitlin Lee will finish with a 142 in the first game for Fort Lee. Soo-Jin Kim nearly had a dangerous split there as she had a couple of pins on either side, but then got that last one to fall. We'll have an opportunity to spare as McLaughlin rolls an 8. Now we'll have her extra ball. McLaughlin trying to finish off with spare, strike, spare in her last 2 frames. Seven and 4 pins left here for Kim. Kim will just miss off to the left side and will finish off that first game with a 118. about 30 pins below her per game average. And missing there in the final shot was Katie McLaughlin. McLaughlin will finish with a 170, so about 30 pins over her per game average. First ball thrown by Jenna Yang, as Yang had been working on 4 consecutive strikes. Just had 1 pin left, so he has a chance here for Yang to get the spare, get the extra ball, and maybe have one last chance at a strike. She had been red hot. And a strike on lane number 49 for Kira Sullivan. That was big again, working off the spare. And the spare is picked up on lane 50 by Jenna Yang. Yang having a great performance, the freshman here in game number 1 of this matchup. She's over her per game average. Here's Kira McLaughlin. Back-to-back strikes here in the 10th frame. She has a chance to strike out here, as she'll be getting her 3rd ball. Here's the 3rd ball for Jenna Yang, as Yang will finish up a brilliant start to this matchup with a 192. Above her per game average, she averages just over 145 per game. So 192, good start here for Jenna Yang. Now here's the 3rd and final ball for Kira Sullivan. Finishing up strong for Kira Sullivan, as Sullivan will finish off with that 7-10 split. Will add 8 more to her total. Going to have a 148 after a slow start. That was a great finish for Kira Sullivan. And Michelle Kim, again, she was trying to find her location in the beginning of this first game, and she has found that, of course, right now. The anchor of this team now with 4 consecutive strikes in the game, and has a chance to finish up with 6 consecutive strikes if she strikes out. Hetzer working off a turkey, 3 consecutive strikes dating back to the 7th frame. Hetzer make it 4 straight strikes. Both of these extraordinary bowlers just getting stronger and stronger as they finish things up here in the first game. And Holy Angels has taken care of business here in this opening game. They'll get the first 2 points in this matchup, as Kim will roll a 9 there. That'll snap her streak of strikes. She had 4 in a row. Hetzer will try to continue her elite form, as she is working on 4 consecutive strikes. This her 2nd ball of the 10th frame. And she also misses on that opportunity, so both of these elite bowlers smiling at one another, each knocking down a 9 in their 2nd ball, and they'll get their 3rd and final ball of this opening game. Holy Angels leads by 72, so they will take game number 1. Kim will finish with a spare in the 10th frame, and will bowl a 203 in game number 1 for Fort Lee. And Hetzer working on the last ball of this game. And she will knock down the spare herself and finish with a game-high 222. An outstanding game there for the leading bowler, Brianna Hetzer of Holy Angels, as it will be a 727 to 655 opening game in favor of Holy Angels. So the Angels of Holy Angels will take a 2-0 lead after the first game here at Boulder City. Stick around, we'll be right back as we get to the start of game number 2 in this matchup of the unbeatens, as Holy Angels and Fort Lee taking on each other here in girls bowling. So the first game was taken by Holy Angels, 727 to 655. As they lead now 2-0 here in this overall showdown, knowing that if they win this second game, they will have clinched a decision against Fort Lee. Brianna Hetzer of Holy Angels had the best first game, 2:22. Michelle Kim started off a little slowly by her standards for Fort Lee, but the Bridgman anchor came back and came up strong. She bowled a 2:03 in game number 1. Big performance for Holy Angels for Rachel Stanbury and Katie McLaughlin bowling above their averages to help lead the Angels to an opening win in that opening game against Fort Lee, as we're just underway with the start of game number 2. Good start there for Soo-Jean Kim. Kim bowled under her average in the first game for Fort Lee, bowled a 118, averaged around a 147. So if she can get going, that could get them right back in this matchup against Holy Angels. Pat Dunn's side, a perfect 11-0 on the season. They will finish up their regular season with matches against Paramus Catholic and IHA as part of the Big North United division. They could clinch a championship with a win against Paramus Catholic on February 3rd. Neil Grant's Bridgman have already clinched a league title, and that's a great start there for Soo-Jean Kim as she picks up the spare in the opening game. The opening frame of game number 2. Back-to-back spares now for the Bridgman. Lachlan looking for a spare of her own, and Holy Angels will miss on that, and their first 2 bowlers will put up 9s. So Fort Lee taking an early advantage here in the start of game number 2. Jenna Yang knocked down 6 there in her first approach. Here's Katie McLaughlin. McLaughlin starting off where she picked up at the end of the first game. She starts off with a strike. First strike of game number 2 for either team. Now Jenna Yang, the freshman, will try to see what she can pick up here with the final 4 pins. Manages to get the 3 pins and finishes with a 9. One point and 1 pin lead right now for Fort Lee. As we go to the anchors, Brianna Hetzer. Hetzer knew that she kind of left something there, didn't want that spin movement that she normally gets. Puts up an 8 on her first ball of game number 2. High game this season for Hetzer, a 286 against Bergen Tech. So she has done some of her best bowling against some of the best teams. A high set of 687 against the Knights of Bergen Tech as well. Had a 222 in the first game. She averages 187.8. Here's a chance at a spare to start off game number 2. And Hetzer just missed it. Off the front pin, but not the back, and she'll settle for a 9. Michelle Kim had picked up a strike in the other lane for Fort Lee. So the Bridgmen have taken an early lead here in game number 2, and now a strike thrown by Rachel Stanbury of Holy Angels. Here's Caitlin Lee trying to work off of a spare. She was upset with herself when that delivery happened, but she still manages to knock down 8 on the spare. Caitlin Lee with a 142 in the first game, just a little above her average. Again, the strength of Fort Lee in that first game. They're number 3 and 4 bowlers, 192, 203. Looking for their top 2 bowlers to pick it up a little bit more in this showdown. And that's a big spare converted there by Caitlin Lee, the senior. Back-to-back spares to start off this second game this afternoon. I'm Dan Long, joined alongside by my producer, Dimitri Nanis. Glad that he could join us here at Boulder City in Hackensack, New Jersey. as we near the end of the regular season. And that's a big spare picked up on lane 50 by Katie McLaughlin for Holy Angels. Here's Soo-Jean Kim. Off of the spare and knocking them all down for the strike in frame number 2. Nice bounce back start already here to game number 2 for Soo-Jean Kim, who again was the low scorer with 118 for the Bridgmen in game number 1. Fort Lee will challenge themselves against one of the other remaining undefeated teams in their next showdown against Northern Highlands on February 6th. And once again, Jenna Yang just avoided a disastrous split opportunity. Got that 7-pin just to fall down in time. Just have 2 remaining pins in the back right corner. Again, if you're just joining us, we're in the midst of the early stages of game number 2. Holy Angels took game number 1, 7:27 to 6:55. The time an 8 put up in the 3rd frame by Kira Sullivan. And a spare knocked down by Jenna Yang here in frame number 2. Now back we go with the 2 anchors, Hetzer and Kim. Hetzer will go first at a 9 in the first frame. Hetzer will leave 2 on the board. Here's Michelle Kim. Was red hot at the end of game number 1. Started off with a strike in the first frame here in game number 2. And once again, back-to-back strikes for Michelle Kim. Showing off why she is the number 2 ranked bowler so far here in Bergen County this season. Averaging just under 191 pins per game. And above her average at a 203, both outstanding bowlers raising their level of play in the first game. Hetzer converts on the spare. And we are through 2 games, 2 frames, I should say. Holy Angels took the first game. As that time it was Caitlin Lee, the senior, who was starting things off of spare. She's gotten 2 spares in her first 2 frames. Now is going to be having an opportunity if she knocks down the 10 pin to get another spare. As just picking up a spare herself was Rachel Stanbury. Stanbury's first spare of game number 2. Aiming that one, just missing though by inches and leaving that 10 pin up. Caitlin Lee now with 46 pins through first 3 frames. As the left-hander, Katie McLaughlin, rolling a 9 there off of her spare. As that spare opportunity will go off the board. So Katie McLaughlin now with 37 pins through the first 3 frames for Holy Angels. Here's Kira Sullivan. Sullivan leaving 2 left, has an opportunity at a spare now in the back left corner. Michelle Kim could not start off with the turkey. Yeah, first 2 consecutive strikes and just left 1 pin up. Now has a chance at a spare herself. The last 2 teammates with back-to-back strikes, so now Fort Lee bowling at a much better rate so far. On top 192 to 129. Here in game number 2. Holy Angels wins this second game, they will clinch the overall matchup. As that's a big executed spare there for Kira Sullivan. On lane 50, Kim of Fort Lee will look to finish things off with a spare of her own. And she does. So the standout bowler and softball pitcher now with 49 pins through the first 3 frames. And she had a big look of relief on her face after she thought she might have missed it by inches, but she does convert on the spare. Still unable to roll a strike here to start off the second game was Hetzer. Put up a 9 spot there right off of her spare in the second frame. Fort Lee in front 194 to 167 right now. As we've already begun the action in the 4th frame on the other lane for Holy Angels. Hetzer with a chance here at the spare. Try to make it back-to-back spares. And she converts. Back and forth we go as we get to, again, the beginning of the 4th frame. And Holy Angels just missing on a spare attempt there by Rachel Stanbury. Here's Caitlin Lee. Starting things off in frame number 4 for Fort Lee. Leadoff bowler will produce a 7. Lee with 2 spares in the first 3 frames of game number 2. Fort Lee off to a much better start here in game number 2 than what they got off to in game number 1. A lot of missed opportunities at spares in that first game that Holy Angels took well advantage of and full advantage of. Now trying to go for the spare here. Here's Lee. Lee will just come up short. She managed to knock down 2 and settle for the 9 in the 4th frame. Up to 55 pins so far here in game number 2 for the leadoff bowler. Just behind Stanbury, who had 57 so far for Holy Angels. A real opportunity here for a spare. And that time McLaughlin will settle for the 9. Here's Sujin Kim. Kim bowling much better here in game number 2. She was trying to go for the turkey in back-to-back strikes. She'll get the 7, but a split at that. So that's going to be tough here for Fort Lee to try to convert on a spare. Here's Sullivan in the right lane. Be interesting where Kim goes and manages just to pick up 1 more pin. So she'll settle for the 8 there after she had thrown a couple of strikes in a row. She's up to 73 though through the first 4 frames. So a much better start for Sujin Kim, who again rolled to 118 in game number 1. And that time the spare is picked up by Sullivan. Seniors trying to take control of this one for Holy Angels. Here's Jenna Yang, the freshman, knocking down the strike. Back-to-back strikes for her. That'll bring up Michelle Kim as the next bowler for Fort Lee. She's got 2 strikes and a spare to start off game number 2. But before her, it's Brianna Hetzer. Hetzer looking for her first strike of game number 2. And she dials it up and knocks him down. Hetzer with her first strike. Now Kim trying to produce her third strike in this fourth frame. Kim gets them all. She guided that one home. Kim showing off the touch here. 3 strikes in 4 frames for Kim, and a spare when she didn't strike. We head to the 5th frame. Fort Lee leading here in game number 2. .275 to .214 right now, the Fort Lee Bridgman advantage. Again, if they win this game, it'll be anyone's contest. Then getting into the 3rd game could be the deciding factor. Caitlin Lee going for the spare. And she'll get it for Fort Lee. Good way to start for the Bridgman here in the 5th frame. Stanbury trying to go for her own spare to start off the 5th frame for the Angels of Holy Angels. Great competition here today between these two teams that know each other quite well. Yeah, they competed for the Bergen County tournament title just over the weekend. Stanbury goes into the gutter that time, and she'll settle for the 9. Fort Lee leading 276 to 223 at the moment here as we're right around the midway point of game number 2. And a slow strike, but a strike nonetheless for Soo-Jean Kim. Great to see the senior bounce back in big-time fashion here in game number 2. Soo-Jean Kim now already has rolled 3 strikes in 5 frames here in game number 2. Here's Jenna Yang. Yang just left that 7-pin up. She'll have a chance at a spare in her next ball. Katie McLaughlin looking to finish off a spare of her own with the last 3 pins. The lefty spinning that one. Might miss the head pin, and it does, and she'll have to settle for just 1 there. So she left 2 on the table. Now Yang for the spare attempt. Yang gets it, and Fort Lee starting to convert. Building their lead, 315 to 231. Again, if you're just joining us, Holy Angels won in game number 1, 727 to 655. Brianna Hetzer balled a game high, 222. She was the high watermark. Fort Lee's team started to pick it up after maybe shaking off the nerves in game number 1. Fort Lee wins here. They could be in a position to tie this overall matchup at 1 game apiece, with the 3rd and final game being the decider. Holy Angels wins here in game number 2. They will clinch the overall win. Michelle Kim missed on that first attempt as she knocks down 8. That was coming off a strike. Looking for what'll be her second spare. She has 3 strikes and potentially 2 spares in her first 5 frames. Almost converting on a very difficult split attempt. It was Kara Sullivan. Just missed it as she was trying to swing that pin from the right side and knock it over. Knock out the back 7-pin on the left side. Here's Kim trying to convert. And she does. That was a difficult opportunity. She made it look easy, and Michelle Kim in a zone right now. 3 strikes, 2 spares. Good start here through 5 frames in game number 2. That'll bring up Hetzer. Brianna Hetzer with a strike in her last frame. Just left 1 pin up. Holds the 9, trying to keep her team close right now. 335 to 266. Fort Lee on top as we're approaching the midway point of game number 2. Hetzer looking to line it up for the potential spare. And she does. Hetzer converts, staying toe-to-toe with Michelle Kim. As we are in now the 6th frame of game number 2. Stanbury finishes off a split with one more. She's got 9. 75 so far. Here's Caitlin Lee, the leadoff bowler for Fort Lee, rolling an 8. And thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in to our first ever broadcast of high school bowling here on the Fort Lee Athletics YouTube channel. Bringing the show on the road here today and outside of East Gymnasium, where we've been for the majority of this winter. Thank Mike Raftery, the athletic director here at Fort Lee, for his support of these broadcasts and getting a chance to showcase some of the best champions that Fort Lee has to offer. As Caitlin Lee is rolling right now. She converts on the spare to start off the 6th frame. Big conversion there for Katie McLaughlin. As she converts on the spare, they need to have those spares being dialed up. Soojin Kim will produce an 8 off of a strike. She's been one of the big differences so far in game number 2 for Fort Lee. She did not bowl up to her standards in the first game with only a 118. She was the lowest scoring bowler, around 30 pins lower than her per game average. She's now back in her normal stellar form. We'll try to finish it off with a spare as well. Here's a big ball for Kim and for Fort Lee. Lead 369 to 295 right now here in game number 2. And that time just the release wasn't there as she threw that into the gutter. So she'll settle for the 8 pins there. She's up to 99 pins so far through 6. Well, the Angels needs those type of openings to develop in their hopes of a comeback here in game number 2. Kara Sullivan has been solid, the senior. Picks up the spare. There's Jenna Yang. Yang just missed another strike. Left that 1 pin up. Yang and Michelle Kim have been the solid twosome in the 3rd and 4th spots. There's another big strike for Brianna Hetzer. This is a big 6 frame for the Angels. A couple of spares and 1 strike. Fort Lee looking to execute here. They're up by 70 pins right now, but a spare would go a long way. And they just missed it. So again, a couple of missed opportunities in this frame. Now giving the opportunity here for Holy Angels to pull a little closer. Here's Kim. Kim manages to get an 8. Try to produce back-to-back spares as now the door opens up a little bit here for Holy Angels after Fort Lee was in control and converting. Lee continues her strong start to this 2nd game. She picked up a spare on lane 50, opening up the 7th frame officially. This is the final ball of frame number 6 for Fort Lee. Kim converts. Back-to-back spares now for Michelle Kim. Working on 107 pins so far in this matchup. Fort Lee on top, 422 to 317. A 105 pin lead. So Fort Lee's bowling at a much better rate so far here in game number 2, trying to put themselves in a position to tie this overall matchup at 1 game apiece. So again, we're in the 7th frame. Back-to-back spares for Fort Lee to start off the 7th frame. Holy Angels just settled for 9 pins. Fort Lee on top by the difference of 114 pins right now here in the 2nd game. So they're closing in on what would be their first game won here today against Holy Angels. Holy Angels won the first game, 727 to 655. Brianna Hetzer was the higher with 222 in that first game, but Fort Lee bowling much better, bowling back to their usual form. Now trying to finish things off here as we approach the turn near the end of this 2nd game. Fort Lee nearly ricocheted. An unbelievable opportunity there for Jenna Yang. She almost picked up an improbable spare, knocking it off the back and nearly ricocheted into the 10 pin. She settles for the 9 though. 115 on the board right now for Yang. Fort Lee leading 441 to 343. And there's a strike for Michelle Kim. See the power on that one. Over 15 miles an hour on the ball that she just tossed down the alley. Kim with another strike. On lane number 49, once again, it's going to be Kira Sullivan. Sullivan gets the job done with a big strike there. Trying to keep her team within striking distance. And handing it off now to Brianna Hetzer. And a strike starting off on the other lane. A good start here. Back-to-back strikes for Holy Angels after Rachel Stanbury knocked them all down. Here's Hetzer trying to make it 3 strikes in a row and really close the gap here for Holy Angels in the 2nd game. Hetzer does just that. 3 straight strikes for Holy Angels. .461 to 393, the lead right now for Fort Lee. Holy Angels trying to mount a comeback. Caitlin Lee for Fort Lee, and she left the split there for the Bridgeman. It'll be tough to pick up the spare in this circumstance. That was the first ball of the 2nd frame for Fort Lee. Katie McLaughlin trying to pick up the spare on lane number 50. And she missed them all. She's upset with herself as she'll settle for 6 in the frame. Lee will aim over to the right side, and she'll settle for the 9 spot there in the 8th frame. She's up to 117 here in the game. And Fort Lee leading here as we bowl in game number 2 in the 8th frame. There's a strike for Kira Sullivan. Sullivan, who averages just under 157 per game. She's starting to get stronger here late in the 2nd game. A 9 spot put on the board by Soo-Jean Kim. Kim already has more pins here as we're bowling in the 8th frame that she had total in the first game. She's been one of those difference makers here for Fort Lee in game number 2. As she tries to lead her team to a win in game number 2 and make it anyone's game heading into the third game. There's Hetzer once again. She's now got the turkey, 3 straight consecutive strikes. 5 strikes in the last 6 balls rolled by the last 2 bowlers. And that time missing on the spare opportunity, and Fort Lee starting to hear the footsteps a bit. Lead is cut down to 50. Fort Lee's got to lean on their experience here. Their last 2 bowlers. Jenna Yang left 1 pin up. And here's a big opportunity for Fort Lee. Yang to try to give their team a little breathing room. Holy Angels is through the 8th frame. Yang, who's got 115 on the board right now. This would be a huge spare to give Neil Grant's side a little breathing room. And Yang will come up clutch there in that position and convert on the spare. Now that'll hand it off to Michelle Kim. She knows that Hetzer, her outstanding counterpart, has started to get strike happy. Hetzer has rolled 3 straight strikes in a row, and Kim would love to regain that strike form herself. Here's Kim. Doesn't get the strike. Leaves 1 up. Will try to get the spare. As Caitlin Lee, her teammate, has already rolled an 8 to start off the 9th frame and converts on a big spare herself. Caitlin Lee, who had a 142 in the first game, is having a strong second game as well. Now here's Kim for what could be a big spare for Fort Lee. Kim converts. Got it. Wasn't really thrilled with it, but still got it. As Kim is working on a spare heading into the 9th frame. That time, Sujin Kim's shot only got 5 to start off the 9th frame. Stanbury and Holy Angels trying to put on the pressure. And she continues to do so. Another strike. Rachel Stanbury, the sophomore, starting to come alive. She had a big first game, bowled a 187. Fort Lee has been leading throughout this second game. Holy Angels starting to come alive here late in the game. Kim puts up a 9 in the 9th, up to 136 in the second game. Here's McLaughlin. McLaughlin will get a slow strike. She was surprised, too, at the end of it. And don't look now, but Holy Angels is seriously closing the gap on the Bridgman. Jenna Yang got a 9 spot. She'll look to convert on the spare. Those strikes are starting to pile up here for Holy Angels. Can Fort Lee do enough just to hold them off? And in the team score right now, Fort Lee has taken a 12-pin advantage after dropping the first game. And that time, a 9 spot put on the board by Kira Sullivan. And a big spare converted by Yang. Up past 134 pins for her. 564 to 506 right now. The overall team lead here for Fort Lee. Again, once again, trying to hold off Holy Angels here in the second game and take it to a third and decisive game to decide who will remain unbeaten here this season in dual matchups. And that time, just getting enough of it was Sullivan. Did a little bit of the body language as well to make sure she got a clip of that. Kim trying to lead her forces to victory and does so there with a strike, a big strike there in the 9th frame. Fort Lee is done through 9. Hetzer has produced strikes in 3 consecutive frames, 4 of her last 5. And she just gets it to kick over, a knock off that front pin. Hetzer now with 4 consecutive strikes. The lead is 49 heading to the 10th frame for Fort Lee. Kaylin Lee starting things off here for Fort Lee with a strike in the 10th frame. That'll mean that she'll be granted at least 2 more balls here in this final frame. Lee is going to be above her first game. Outstanding ball there to start off. On lane number 50, Stanbury started with 9 pins down. Has a chance at the spare to get her a 3rd ball here in the 10th frame. Stanbury will convert and get that extra ball. Here's Lee working off of the strike on her first ball in the 10th frame. She'll knock down 8 and have a chance to finish it off with a spare. Final ball for Stanbury. Just missed on the strike as there's 1 pin that was just wobbling but refused to go down. 152 for Rachel Stanbury in game number 2. And converting on the spare there was Caitlin Lee. And the senior will finish off with a 157 in game number 2. 20 pins higher than her per game average. And 15 pins higher than in game 1. These two teams so close to one another. That's a big strike for Katie McLaughlin. The sophomore at a 170 in game number 1. That's 2 consecutive strikes now after having a slow strike earned in the 9th frame. She'll be guaranteed at least 2 more balls here in the 10th frame. Soonjin Kim getting an 8 spot put on the board. She'll try to spare and earn a 3rd ball as well. McLaughlin working on 2 consecutive strikes. We'll get 6 there, and we'll have a chance to finish it off with a spare. Fort Lee leads by a 622 to 608 margin right now. Trying to look for that spare. Just left it short. That could be the door that opens for Holy Angels as Kim will settle for that 9 spot. 145 though, much better for Soonjin Kim. And McLaughlin can't spare it off there at the end, as McLaughlin will finish with a 131. So Fort Lee having the advantage in the first 2 bowlers of this 10th frame, as Jenna Yang trying to finish things off here for the Bridgemen. Yang worked on a back-to-back spares in the last 2 frames. She could pick up another spare here and get that important 3rd ball, as now McLaughlin so clutch here near the end of this contest. She picks up the strike. As now the lead is down to 7 pins for Fort Lee. They are desperately trying to find their way to the finish line here in game number 2. This is a huge point of this overall match as Jenna Yang trying to pick up the spare and get a third ball of the 10th frame. McLaughlin on the other side will roll a 7 and have a split. Off of the split here, can she get enough? And she does! What a big conversion there for Jenna Yang and Fort Lee. Just got enough to get through. Good sportsmanship there as Pat Dunn, the head coach of Holy Angels, applauds the efforts and that big conversion for Jenna Yang. That ball might have done just enough to give Fort Lee some breathing room. Kira Sullivan be facing that split situation. And she gets 2 and nearly kicked it back into that corner. She'll settle for the 2, but Kira Sullivan bowling a 178 there in game number 2. 30 pins better than what she bowled in game number 1. Now it is a 1-pin difference, and this is a big ball here for Jenna Yang. Yang having that one drift away a little bit, and she'll settle for the 7. So Yang will finish with a 168 in game number 2, and it comes down to this. There are 2 anchors, 2 of the top 3 bowlers in the county going toe-to-toe here. Brianna Hetzer working on 4 consecutive strikes going against Michelle Kim. Kim had a hot start to game number 2, but has not been as prolific striking. Kim will be left with a split here, and that could be disastrous for the Bridgemen. Not only not getting the strike, but having a split and maybe not getting that extra ball. 663 to 639, the lead for Fort Lee, and also knowing that Hetzer is on fire. Fort Lee, can they pull a rabbit out of the hat? They have to hope for Hetzer to also help. Hetzer left that 1 pin up, the 10 pin in the back right corner. She'll have a chance at a spare, but again, if Kim can spare this and find a way to do it, that'll keep Fort Lee in front, but this is going to be danger time as Hetzer is putting on that pressure. They need to hope for a little luck here for Fort Lee. Right now, Holy Angels lead 6-6-6 to 6-6-3, a 3-pin lead in game number 2. A furious comeback here in game number 2 for Holy Angels after Fort Lee was in control for the majority of it. And Hetzer missing on the spare. This keeps hope alive for Fort Lee, but this is going to be an incredibly difficult conversion for Michelle Kim. Kim trying to kind of split the uprights, but only managed to get 1. And that'll end the second game, and Holy Angels will win by 1 pin, 6-6-6 to 6-6-5, and that has assured the Holy Angels the overall match here today. So Fort Lee will not win and will fall from the rank of the unbeaten here today after a tough second game that saw, again, Fort Lee in control throughout, but Holy Angels came alive near the end of that second game, and 6-6-6 to 6-6-5. Can't get any closer than that. Michelle Kim finishes with a 195 in the second game. And Brianna Hetzer bowled a 205. And again, that split so costly there for the Bridgemen by Kim. So right now, Holy Angels leads 4-0. And the most that Fort Lee can do is win this third game and also win total pins, but they would fall a little short here, as the most they can do is 3 total team points here today. So Holy Angels has already assured themselves of this overall matchup win and will remain perfect on the season, while Fort Lee will fall from the ranks of the unbeaten but still remain as the county champions. As we're underway now for the start of game number 3. Richmond saw 2 better scores from their first 2 bowlers in game number 2. Caitlin Lee, 157, Soo Jean Kim, a 145, but their last 2 bowlers, Jenna Yang and Michelle Kim, each with lower scores in game number 2. Holy Angels got 2 lower scores from their first 2 bowlers, but a higher score from their third bowler. Kira Sullivan was the one who really came alive there near the end of game number 2, and she's the one that propelled the Angels to that win. She put up a 178 in game number 2, and Sullivan, who averages a 156.5. That was the difference. And again, that split so costly to Michelle Kim. Could not even get a spare there, as she had consistently been doing throughout the course of game number 2. That left them 1 pin shy. A heartbreaking 666 to 665 in game number 2. Caitlin Lee started off with a spare for Fort Lee. Now looking for a spare as well, but just missing was Soo Jean Kim. Rachel Stanberry started with a spare for Holy Angels in her lane. As McLaughlin will knock it down and leave 2 left. Again, for Holy Angels, the road ahead for this top-ranked team. They'll be taking on Paramus Catholic and IHA in league showdown. 1 more win for the Angels will clinch the league championship, while Fort Lee will finish off their regular season against Northern Highlands. Fort Lee, Holy Angels, Northern Highlands, and Northern Valley Demarest were the 4 unbeaten teams still remaining in Bergen County heading into play today. Holy Angels will remain unbeaten. And we thank you again for joining us here, courtesy of Fort Lee Athletics, for the first ever broadcast of high school bowling, as we've been enjoying ourselves here from Boulder City in Hackensack, New Jersey. Fort Lee in the black and Holy Angels primarily in the blue, except for this woman, Kira Sullivan, who's been in her maroon top, and she was the difference, the senior, in that win in game number 2 by 1 pin. As Holy Angels fought their way back to win by 1. This first frame, a pair of spares for the Bridgemen. Michelle Kim trying to produce the first strike. And she'll do just that. Trying to make amends after she had to be frustrated at how that second game ended. Thought she threw a good ball in the first ball and then had that really tough split. I think it was an 8-10 split and knocked down 1 pin, but that was the margin in second game. Sullivan looking for the spare and gets it. 3 straight spares for Holy Angels. Starting off the second frame for Holy Angels is Rachel Stanberry with a strike, and we'll still get to the first ball thrown of game number 3 by Brianna Hetzer. Hetzer 222 in the first game, 205 in the second game. Performing here today when it's mattered the most. She rolls an 8 in her first ball of game number 3. Number 3 bowling average in Bergen County, just behind Michelle Kim. And that's going to be a 9 left up on the board for Katie McLaughlin, as that 7 pin in the back left corner just refused to fall down. Dan Long, Dimitri Nanis. Question is going to be, what new sport can we do after this? Where have we not gone yet? As we're broadcasting all the action here. As Hetzer will convert on the spare, and Holy Angels starts off the first frame with 4 spares. Already started off the second frame with a strike. Lachlan looking for her second spare, just curled it to the inside and missed on the 7-pin. As Holy Angels trying to finish things off here and try to win for a third straight game. Holy Angels won 7-0 in the matchup last December 9th. Brianna Hetzer rolled a 3-game set of 446 to lead the Angels to the 7-0 win last December. Those games were not as close. Today, obviously a heartbreaking loss in game number 2 has put this out of reach, but Fort Lee trying to finish things off in style as well. Nice start to game number 3 for Caitlin Lee. Lee now with back-to-back spares in her first 2 frames. Lee bowled a 142 in the first game, 157 in the second. Nice crowd assembled here, also watching in and watching even our broadcast coverage of this matchup of these 2 teams, 2 of the top teams in the county. As Kira Sullivan, always with a big smile there on her face, and rightfully so. She has had a great afternoon here for her side. That time, it's going to be a strike for Sujin Kim. Kim gets the second strike of game number 3 for the Bridgemen. Hetzer will goal now in lane number 49. As Hetzer will produce the strike, her first strike of game number 3. Jenna Yang had a 192 in game number 1, fell back a bit in game number 2, a 168 for the freshman who averages around 145. As Caitlin Lee will start things off on lane 49 for Fort Lee. As everyone trying to catch up in terms of the order where everyone's going. That time the spin just off the mark as the freshman missing, leaving 2 on the board. She's got 26 through the first 2 frames. Lee will also be denied her spare. First time she does not produce a spare here in the third game. She's got 45 through 3. Kim on lane 50. Kim rattles them all down as Michelle Kim has started off this third game with back-to-back strikes. Michelle Kim had 9 strikes against Indian Hills in the Bergen County Tournament Final, including 6 strikes in the 10th frame in the first 2 games. She was so clutch in leading her team in this school to their first ever bowling county championship in girls bowling. Testing themselves here today against a very formidable opponent. Going toe-to-toe with the Angels, but Holy Angels will come out and prevail. As that one just drift over to the left side. Always see in these third games, and also you'd have to think of the back of your minds if you're Fort Lee. You know that you don't have the opportunity to maybe prevail overall in the team scoreboard, and also just by nature, if anyone has ever bowled in their life, in a third game, you are starting to feel the effects of rolling constantly. You're starting to get tired, so sometimes you're seeing missed shots that weren't missed throughout the first couple of games. Stanbury doesn't miss there on converting on the spare. 2 spares and a strike now for Rachel here in the start of her third game. Kim just missing on her spare opportunity herself. She'll leave the 1. She'll have 37 through the first 3 frames. Holy Angels on top by 3 right now here as we bowl in the 3rd frame of the 3rd game. Jenna Yang. Knocked down 8, will have 2 remaining. McLaughlin, the lefty, trying to convert on a difficult spare. She'll leave 2 and settle for the 8. McLaughlin has 36 through the first 3 frames. Holy Angels took control in the first game, 727 to 655. Fort Lee never really led, as Yang will have that one fall into the gutter. Leave 2 on the lane. Fort Lee was ahead for most of that second game, and again, if you're just joining us, got clipped by 1 pin in the second frame, in the second game, I should say. As Kira Sullivan leaving the split there. Michelle Kim. Give her the turkey to start off game number 3. That's 3 consecutive strikes for the senior star for Fort Lee. Kim had a slow start to her first game and caught fire at the end to finish up with a 203. Had a quick start to game number 2 and then again had that tough split that she left after her first ball of the 10th frame. Could not convert on the spare. She finished with a 195. Still bowling above her per game average in both games so far here today. Brianna Hetzer, who's going to be getting set to bowl on lane 50 coming up. She has been excellent, as advertised. 222, still the highest game out of any bowler so far here today between these two sides. And then put up a 205, strong finish. There she goes with a strike here. Back-to-back strikes now for Hetzer. Holy Angels looking for a spare on lane 49, and they get it from Stanbury. Stanbury's just been so solid. Couple spares here in game number 3. We'll have more broadcast coverage of the Fort Lee Bridgman boys and girls basketball seasons coming up. As a couple of new additions to our broadcast schedule, including on Saturday morning at 10 a.m. start time, as the boys basketball team will be next in action against Demarest. As the boys and girls teams are both trying to jockey for some key victories here late in the regular season to garner more power points, and with that, potential more home games at East Gymnasium. So a reminder, fans, that you could join us for our continued broadcast coverage of Bridgman basketball. Boys and girls games coming up in the next couple of days, as we'll have a jam-packed schedule. McLaughlin looking for the spare. And dead eye. She'll accurately get that one. On lane 50, Sujin Kim with the approach. Kim will get 9 in that first offering and have a chance at a spare, with the 10 pins still being left up. Holy Angels leading in total pins as well. Right now at this point, 1601 to 1513. Sullivan leaving 2 up. Kim's second ball coming up here in the 4th frame. And that'll be just a little too wide as that'll go into the gutter. 9 will be left up. 46 total so far through 4 frames for Soo-Jean Kim, the senior. Right around her average in the last game at 145 after bowling a 118 in the first game. Sullivan with the split out in front of her, just missed wide to the left side. Sullivan will settle for the 8 pins there. She's got 51 total through 4. There's a strike on lane 50 for Jenna Yang. Yang's first strike of this third game. Brianna Hetzer now looking for the turkey. 3 consecutive strikes gets you the gobbler. There's the turkey. 3rd consecutive strike for Hetzer. Now it's on Michelle Kim looking for her 4th consecutive strike, and she gets it. 4 in a row for Michelle Kim. So the 2 anchors starting to show off why they are 2 of the county's finest bowlers in girls bowling. We're through 4 frames now, and this the 3rd and final game. Through 4. It's a 246 to 233 lead for Holy Angels. Caitlin Lee for Fort Lee with a roll of 9. Stanbury approaching with her first shot. Opportunity for Holy Angels as she kind of slows her roll a bit here. To allow Caitlin Lee with her second shot here of the 5th. Looking for that 7 ball and 7 pin, but she missed it straight down Broadway. Lee was 62 through 5. Halfway done with the final game. And Stanbury strikes for Holy Angels. A strike off the spare. So she's been alternating spares and strikes so far here in the 3rd. Now Soo-Jean Kim. That one rolls off to the left side. Been a fun day bringing you all the sights and sounds here from Boulder City. Holy Angels, if you're just joining us, fans, have already clinched. We'll see what the final margin is and if Fort Lee can win this final game, as Soo-Jean Kim will leave 1 left standing and settle for the 9 pins in that frame. As that one is going to be a roll of 8 for Jenna Yang. Freshman had an outstanding first game, 192, even above her average with a 168 in the second game. And at these type of matchups, they just get you battle hardened for the postseason and great matchups against great teams. It's going to be a strike on lane 50 for Kira Sullivan. Now trying to finish off the spare. Here's Jenna Yang. Spun it a little too much English that went into the gutter. Holy Angels in front right now, 294 to 267 here as we bowl with the final bowler for each side here in frame number 5. Hetzer knocks down 7 on her first offering, upset with herself. As Kim was trying to make it 5 straight strikes, but left a couple standing still. She'll go for the spare. Michelle Kim bowled a 203 in game number 1, a 195 in game number 2. Averages 190.9 per game this season. Had a high of 244 against Wayne Hills, a high sit of 640 against Dwight Morrow. As Hetzer will finish off the spare on the other side. And now Kim will try to finish off a spare of her own with a 6 and 10 pins, but she just missed. So she'll settle for the 9 there, as she's at 116 halfway through. There's a strike thrown by Caitlin Lee. Lee has provided a nice, consistent start to this lineup for Coach Neil Grant, and we'd like to thank Neil Grant and Patrick Dunn for their support of our broadcasting efforts here this afternoon. It is not common to have a broadcast crew set things up and coordinate everything with a bowling group, but they have been nothing short of brilliant in terms of how accommodating they have been and their team has been, and we are thankful for them allowing us to come here for the ride and showcase these outstanding bowlers from both schools. So strike just moments ago by Rachel Stanbury. The sophomore has been lighting it up here today for Holy Angels. 187 bowled in the first game, a 152 in the second game, working on a good game here in game number 3. There's a strike again, as now Fort Lee starting to put things together here. They have a chance with Michelle Kim to strike out the frame. Strikes by Caitlin Lee, Soo-Jean Kim, and Jenna Yang as they try to pull closer. Holy Angels picks up the spare by McLaughlin. Push their lead here in game number 3 to 361 to 323. But a strike potentially for Kim could do wonders, as Fort Lee trying to track them down. Kim just missed out on another strike. Has the chance at the spare, though, here in the 6th frame. Started off with 4 consecutive strikes. In game number 3, got a 9 in the last frame, and now a 9 here. Sullivan on lane 49. Knocks them all down for another strike and another big smile, as the senior is applauded with her efforts from her teammates. It's the thing I love about bowling, the sportsmanship involved between both coaches and players. It's refreshing in this day and age. You could have competition, but you don't have to really just will the other team to lose. You could celebrate the efforts and the accomplishments of who you're going up against. Kim converts on the spare as we now head to the 7th frame now. 371, 333 lead. Close to 50 pins right now for Holy Angels, and they'll lengthen that lead as well with another strike produced by Brianna Hetzer as we head now to the 7th frame. As that one was a roll of 9. Lee nearly had herself a split on both sides, but got those pins on the right side of the lane to fall at the last moment. She'll produce the roll of 8 and now have a chance or a spare if she could convert with a 7 and 4 still left standing. Stanbury will look to finish things off with a 10-pin, staring her down. Stanbury will just miss by inches. She's up to a 136 through 7. Stanbury might be looking at one of her best games so far here today. Lee will just get enough to get the spare converted. And Caitlin Lee solid here again in another game for Coach Neil Grant. That's going to be a split lift up by Soo-Jean Kim. Senior will most likely just try to go to the right side, get the 2, and maybe have something ricochet off to the left side of the lane. As Holy Angels converts with McLaughlin on the spare. 435 to 367, the lead here in the third and final game of the day for Holy Angels. And that time, Kim was not able to finish that one off. She'll settle for the 7. Again, we're in the 7th frame between these two sides. Holy Angels is going to remain undefeated in dual matches. As with the win, they will advance 12-0 on the season. And the newly minted county champions of Fort Lee will suffer their first head-to-head defeat of the year. And there's a strike thrown by Jetta Yang. So Yang now with back-to-back strikes here late in game number 3. As that'll set Michelle Kim up to throw her first ball of the 7th frame. As she'll wait for Kira Sullivan to finish off what she has planned here. She's got a tough split in front of her. McLaughlin manages to knock down a pair in the left corner. And she'll settle for the 9 spot, put on the board. Here's Michelle Kim. Kim with the strike. Started off with 4 consecutive strikes and now gets her 5th strike of this 3rd game. As she gets congratulations from members of her team, coaching staff, as well as the members of the Holy Angels contingent. Michelle's high game today has been a 203. There's another strike thrown by Hetzer. It has been such a treat to see 2 of the best showing off their talents here today. 2 seniors who have done an exceptional job in their senior campaigns. Kim was so money in leading her program to their first ever county championship, and Hetzer is trying to lead her team to a continued undefeated run and has her sights set on maybe another league title for Holy Angels as well in their next couple of matches. Stanbury looking for the spare on 49. And she gets it. One pin left up there for Soo-Jean Kim. Kim has done a nice job of bouncing back after struggling a little bit there in the first game. Kim trying to spare this one off here in the 8th frame. And Fort Lee will face off against Northern Highlands in their next contest on February 6th here at Boulder City. Kim looking for that, and it stays just inside and knocks down that 10-pin in the far right corner. Looked like it might have been destined for a gutter ball, but just stayed inside and did a good job of that location. Speaking of location, there's a spare converted. Knocking down the 7-pin there was Katie McLaughlin. Yang looking for a little English there at the end, but denied her turkey in her third consecutive strike. As Jenna Yang now will look for the spare once again with the 10-pin. Both teams bowling here in the 8th frame. A strike and a spare, the first two bowlers for Fort Lee, 2 consecutive spares for Holy Angels. Good ball there in the first offering from Kira Sullivan. She gets 9. Yang just a little too strong that time, threw it into the gutter and left that 10-pin up. No chance at the spare conversion. Now Sullivan will try to convert herself here on lane number 49. Sullivan rolls it right down Broadway and converts on the spare. Back to lane 50 as Kim generates back-to-back strikes now in this contest. Give Michelle Kim 6 strikes in this third and final game. Looking to finish off strong in what would be her best performance of this afternoon's matchup. Not too shabby herself, Brianna Hetzer. Hetzer, that time with a rare split. Pair of pins on both the left and right side. The time you see, maybe she didn't get the curve that she wanted around that pocket and actually hit the head pin on a 1-pin straight. That is something that I have perfected. Not the strikes, but the splits. As that time, Hetzer will settle for the 8 in the 8th as we head to the final 2 frames of this afternoon's contest. Hetzer up to 169 on her afternoon here in game number 3, so she has a good opportunity for 3 consecutive games that maybe are in the 200s. Again, her average per game is 187.8. She has stepped up when it's mattered the most in this big showdown against Fort Lee. There's a strike thrown by Katie McLaughlin. Lee looks for the spare on 49. And she gets it. Continued solid play for Coach Neil Grant's first bowler in his lineup. Leadoff bowler, Caitlin Lee. That time is split, produced by Sullivan. Slow ball, rolling, right into the pocket, and good knockdown there, and trying desperately to knock that final pin down. But Soo-Jin Kim is just going to have to settle for the 9 pins. But a chance at a second consecutive spare. Up to 98 pins here in game number 3 for the senior Soo-Jin Kim. Overall pin total also in favor of Holy Angels, as Sullivan gets 2 to move to 9 pins there. 132 total for Sullivan. Kim with the attempt at the spare. Got that spin on it and converts. Nice finish up there, as she'll be working on a spare heading into the 10th frame. That time, the strike fired by Hetzer. You knew she was frustrated after having that split in the last frame. As again, we're closing in on the conclusion of this one. We had some theatrics in the second game. It proved to be a one-pin win for Holy Angels, 666 to 665. Holy Angels bowled to 727 in the opening game, as Fort Lee had a 655. Yang settles for the 8 there. She's up to 125. As now it's going to be setting up Michelle Kim. Kim looking for her second turkey of this third game. She has 6 strikes in her first 8 frames of game number 3. And Kim gets another strike. So now 7 strikes here in this third game for Michelle Kim. And has shown off her ability here in this third and final game of the day. Now we enter into the 10th frame. Caitlin Lee just went before. She finished with a 149 for Fort Lee. After bowling a 9. Rachel Stanbury bowling on an 8 to start off the 10th frame. Soo-Jean Kim fired a strike in her first ball, so she'll have 2 more here in the 10th. Kim with a roll of 9 now has a chance to finish up strong. Stanbury looking to convert on the spare. And she does. She'll get the extra ball. Big game here for the leadoff bowler in this Holy Angels lineup. Soo-Jean trying to finish off her day on a high note. Just missed on the spare opportunity. And she'll finish with a 137 for game number 3. Stanbury with a great performance herself on the other lane, finished off with that 9. 181. Second best game of the day. Bowled a 187, 152, and a 181. That time again. The slow but effective strike for Katie McLaughlin on lane 49. Jenna Yang trying to finish it off with a spare on lane 50 and get a third and final ball. And she'll do that. She'll earn that last opportunity of the day. McLaughlin bowling now will have 2 more shots. Another strike for McLaughlin, and she has a chance to strike out here in the 10th frame. She's got herself a turkey. After dating back to the 9th frame, she had a strike. Opens up the 10th with 2 consecutive strikes of her own. This could be a great way to finish for McLaughlin. Here's the final ball of the day for Yang. Yang will get a 9 and finish with a 144. McLaughlin trying to strike out here in the 10th and give her 4 straight strikes to end the game. And she'll be content with that last ball being an 8. And she will finish with a 178, her highest game of the day. Again, this has been a fun one, making a little history broadcasting bowling for the first time. I don't know how many other schools can say they can do that. As Michelle Kim continues her stellar play here in the third game. You have to think maybe in the back of her mind was just that tough way of losing in game number 2. Her first bowl of the 10th frame led to a split. Managed to get only one further pin, and her team came up 1 pin shy. 4 consecutive strikes in this game. This is the second time in game number 3 that Michelle Kim has rolled 4 consecutive strikes. As Sullivan trying to finish off her day. We'll have a split as well on the 49th lane. Kim had a 203 in game number 1. I think she'll surpass that easily here. In this one, she gets another strike. As finally getting a little kick there at the end to knock down the 7 pin. And a little history being made here by Michelle Kim as well, as she has been utterly outstanding here in game number 3 for Fort Lee. That will be in a losing effort. She has shown off why she is vying for the ultimate honors of being one of those top-ranked bowlers in the county. As Sullivan will end off her day with a 141 in game number 3. Michelle Kim trying to strike out here. And she will do just that. A 256 for Michelle Kim in game number 3. For Kim, that is her highest game of the season, as she previously had a high of 244 against Wayne Valley. What a performance by Michelle Kim. Nearly perfect here in the 3rd and final game for Fort Lee. Now that'll bring up Brianna Hetzer as the one to close out everything here today. Again, while Fort Lee will fall in the team action. What a performance as Hetzer will roll a strike to start things off here in the 10th frame. 256 for Michelle Kim, her high game this entire season. .654 series and set. There's also a big mark here this year for Kim. Hetzer trying to finish it off. Had one strike, and now we'll have a chance to end it with a spare. As Hetzer will have another 200-plus game. Had 222 in the first game, 205 in game number 2. And she and Michelle Kim have put on a show here today for all of us to enjoy. Nice opportunity here for the spare, and Hetzer gets it. And will finish off her day with a 218. And Hetzer will finish 222, 205, and 218 on her day for a 645, just behind Michelle Kim's 654. Outstanding performance between both these sides. 686 team score, the highest score of any game for Fort Lee in that third game, but Holy Angels victorious 7-18. They will bowl a final score, Holy Angels will, of 2,101 and 2,111 to the final score of 2,006 for Fort Lee. So officially Holy Angels will be victorious by a final score on the team scoreboard of 7-0 here today against Fort Lee, but it was much closer than it was a season ago when Holy Angels won 1591 to 1253 and swept every game. So again, Michelle Kim with an outstanding 256 game produced in game number 3, but Holy Angels will remain undefeated on the season. They will move to 12-0 on the year. Fort Lee will suffer their first defeat of the year, but the county champs still have plenty to play for later on this season, as they're going to be taking on Northern Highlands in their regular season finale, as well as getting ready for the postseason run. I believe that we will be expecting to be joined one final time by Fort Lee head coach Neil Grant, as he will want to join us, as he's just having some final words with a couple of his student athletes. And again, what a day of bowling here. And it was a nip-tuck affair. We saw two of the top 3 rated bowlers in the county going toe-to-toe, and that lived up to the matchup as well. And again, you get an opportunity where you're seeing a team win by 1 lone pin. That's not often. And that's all here on our first ever foray into bowling broadcasting. As again, we're just waiting to close up this broadcast, as we'll be joined once again by Coach Grant. And also by Coach Pat Dunn, as they joined us in our pregame coverage leading up to the start of today's event. And now joining us here again. And guys, that was some great bowling that we got to see, and also be witness to 2 of the top individual bowlers that they played up to their level, and it was a toe-for-toe matchup. And as I was just saying in kind of closing off this broadcast, it's not often that you see a game come down to 1 pin, and that's what it was in the second. That just shows how great a level of play that both your teams bowl at, and that's a credit to both of you guys as well.
Well, one thing we're definitely proud of how we bowled. We didn't lose; they beat us. It's always, there's always, if you bowl a low-scoring match, you can always look back and say that. But their girls bowled fantastic today. We bowled way over our normal team average of 620. We averaged close to 670 a game. So it was, a great day, even though we didn't win. Kudos to Holy Angels and Coach Dunn. I'm really proud of Michelle Kim. It's her first 250 game ever in high school bowling. It was one of the goals she put out this year, so I'm really happy she was able to accomplish that. And we're going to see Holy Angels in the state sectional, so we hope to compete against them hard again one other time before the season ends.
And Coach Dunn, again, this is just going to be great for your team to battle harder than them, get them to play in tough environments where you're having to go toe-for-toe with another bowler and right next to you putting up big numbers. That had to be fun to watch and see how your team and your student athletes responded.
Yeah, it is. The girls work real hard during the year, and we really needed, especially after Saturday, it was a little bit of a disappointing finish, something to really motivate us, and certainly we did today. Coach Neal here, he always has a good squad, and the girls really, both teams, I think, bowled to their capacity, and I think we kind of brought it out in each other. Bree bowled well. She's been the leader all year, so that doesn't surprise me. Rachel bowled well. We were a little more consistent with our spares today, which was something we really need to do. And if we're going to compete at the state sectional against teams like Fort Lee, we're going to have to improve on our spare shooting, and we kind of did that today. So I have to say we did catch a few breaks today with strikes, but, that's part of it. Sometimes you catch some breaks, sometimes you don't. And Saturday, it seemed like we were talking, it seemed like some of the shots we threw on Saturday, we left splits. Today, they seem to go. So it's from one day to the next. You never know what's going to happen. So, Coach, thank you. And it was a great match. It really was.
And it was fun from my vantage point behind you guys, behind your team, that when those big-time shots were converted from both sides, you both of you would have big smiles on your faces like, wow, can you believe that split was converted for a spare? And that big shot was converted by maybe a player that hasn't put up big-time numbers consistently. It was fun to see both of you in that moment say and kind of regard, wow, this is something pretty special that we're seeing here in a regular season matchup.
I think both of us, we love bowling. We love especially high school bowling. And when the girls succeed, it's in a way a success for us as well. And we definitely enjoy it. And I think both of us and my girls and the Fort Lee girls as well show some sportsmanship. And that's the best thing really about bowling is the sportsmanship, that somebody throws a good shot on the other team, you can appreciate it. And vice versa. When you throw a good shot, they can appreciate it as well.
And I was even mentioning that in the broadcast. That was refreshing, to say the least, for me, who gets to cover and is honored to cover so many different sports in high school ranks, but to see that level of sportsmanship that, despite maybe something going against your team, you're still applauding the efforts and the accomplishments of the people that you're going against, because, greatness recognizes greatness, and that's what we saw on display here all afternoon.
it's very common in high school bowling, much more than some other sports that I see, that even though obviously parents are rooting for their kids to bowl well and to win, there's a lot of camaraderie and there's a lot of good spirits amongst the parents and the kids. And that's, teaching moments for us as well. We know our kids are disappointed by losing, but we want them to play with respect and win with class, win and lose with dignity, and understand that this is just part of life and growing experiences. As a coach, that's more important than the actual scores in the bowling.
Well, we were honored to be here for this match, guys, and I don't know if there's ever been a case of a high school bowling match being streamed, certainly in the regular season, let alone for the championships. But thank you to both of you for your accommodations and for your class on full display here, and it was thrilling to watch two of the best teams in Bergen County go toe-to-toe, and hopefully that you guys will be doing this in a little bit for the state sectionals as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Dimitri, for making this happen today.
Thank you very much, guys. Again, congratulations to Holy Angels, who remain undefeated on the season in these duels, while Fort Lee, the reigning county champs, they will live to bowl another day and will try to take down Northern Highlands in their next matchup. So for everybody here from Boulder City in Hackensack, New Jersey, for Dimitri Nanis, our producer, cameraman, and everything on this broadcast, I'm Dan Long saying so long, and thanks for joining us for the first ever edition of Fort Lee High School Bowling here on the Fort Lee Athletics YouTube channel. Take care, everybody.